Hey everyone, this is Friedel Hacker AJ Rave, and I'm here with my latest video for the Geekiary News Briefs, where I quickly go over some of the stuff that happened in geek and pop culture so that you have news on your radar. So let's start. Of course, I'm going to begin by talking about the box office because, yeah, that's always how I start. So, coming to the box office, according to Box Office Mojo, the domestic 2020 weekend for September 4th to 6th ended up being like this. Tenet opened up in the US in around 2,810 theaters and it was able to gross around $20 million. Now, $20 million also includes the early screenings it had. It also includes the gross from Canada, so it's not much. So it still feels that even though a whole lot of people on Twitter actually like to pretend that the pandemic isn't real and that it's not actually happening, when it comes down to it, a whole lot of people aren't necessarily comfortable when it comes to going to the theater and watching a movie. So yeah, I'm like, you know what? I guess that means that a whole lot of people do take this pandemic seriously. So even though they might say something on Twitter, when it comes down to it, in real life they aren't thinking of risking their lives to just go out in the cinema for a movie. This movie is going to end up on streaming anyway. Let's see how Tenet ends up doing, because then we can kind of figure out what Warner Bros. Will decide to do with Wonder Woman 2 and Dune and the rest of the movies it still has to release. And yeah, Disney ended up releasing Mulan on PVOD through the Disney streaming service for around 29.99. Disney hasn't released those numbers yet, but yeah, if Disney can release films on PVOD, major films like Mulan, then maybe Warner Bros. Might end up releasing Wonder Woman 2 online, or maybe Disney might end up releasing Black Widow. Who knows? It all depends on whether or not people will be comfortable going to the theaters when more theaters, especially in New York and major cities, open up. Coming to the rest of the movies, New Mutants ended up falling more than 58%, which good. I'm happy about it, because this movie ended up being a mess, especially after Josh Boone basically told everyone that he's the kind of white guy who doesn't necessarily care about racism. And I'm like, you know what? Disney should have burned this movie. Disney shouldn't have released this movie to begin with. Then Bill and Ted is doing fine. It has a total gross of more than 2 million, which makes sense, especially because it is already available on PVOD. So that's that for the domestic box office. Again, the upcoming Tenet numbers will be very interesting. Let's see the hold it might end up having in the second weekend, and maybe more people might feel comfortable going to the theaters next week. Who knows? Again, I'm very, very interested in this stuff. Coming to other movie news, Robert Pattinson, who is he was shooting the new Batman movie in London, and it turns out that he tested positive, and yeah, production has to be shut down for the time being, and basically it might end up going on break for a week or two. And I mean, when it comes to a person's life compared to watching a major movie, I value a person's life. So yeah, all the best to Robert Pattinson. Here's to hoping that he ends up recovering. Coming to the drama side of things in Hollywood, John Boyega ended up recently doing an interview with GQ UK, and he basically dragged Disney the House of Mouse, especially because of how the Star Wars franchise ended up handling his character. John Boyega basically said that the Star Wars franchise, when it really comes down to it, the writers didn't know how to handle the POC characters, which included Finn, Poe, and especially Rose Tico. I mean, I agree with John Boyega. The way the Star Wars franchise handled Kelly Marie Tran as Rose Tico was embarrassing. It was so bad. I felt sorry for her, especially in the last Skywalker movie. Rise of the Skywalker, yeah, Rise of the Skywalker, the last movie in the trilogy. I felt bad for her, but now not Rose Tico, Kelly Marie Tran has been cast as the voice for the upcoming Raya and the Last Dragon, so I'm excited for that. And John Boyega, yeah, more truth to power. Kudos to John Boyega for telling everyone his truth, and hopefully him continuing to be vocal about his experience might end up changing Hollywood for the better. talking about how Hollywood has been treating POC actors and POC fictional characters. Ray Fisher, who ended up playing Cyborg in the Justice League movie, he's currently in an ongoing investigation that involves him and Warner Bros. And it's a very, very delicate situation. Ray Fisher has been very public with his experience working on the Justice League movie. He basically tweeted out that Joss Whedon's on-set treatment of the cast and crew of Justice League was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. He was enabled in many ways by Jeff Johns and John Berg, and yeah, the entire situation is still developing, and again, I don't want to say anything, and there's a whole lot of alleged stuff going around, but yeah, go follow Ray Fisher if you want to see what's up, and hopefully everything can be handled soon, and he ends up coming out for the better in the end, because yeah, there are people on Twitter who don't trust him, but I don't want to say anything because the situation is very, 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 very delicate. While we're on the topic of handling fictional POC characters, Marvel's Future Fight ended up getting backlash because the game released a new update for Storm, and of course it came with a promotional image, and that promotional image, I mean, when I looked at it, I was like, wait, is that supposed to be Storm? Like, it doesn't look like Storm to me. And of course the image got a whole lot of backlash. People were saying that the game was whitewashing Storm, and you know what, I have to agree, because there are instances where people don't necessarily, some people, not all, of course, some people don't realize that when it comes to POC, a member of the POC community, being POC doesn't mean that you're basically a white person who has been tanned or dipped into a different color. Like POC, when you're a person of color, there's a whole lot of history, there's a whole lot of genetic history involved, and a whole lot. There are artists online, which I end up seeing a lot when I'm browsing through fan art. There are certain artists who end up drawing POCs like they would a non-POC person, and then they just color them a darker shade, and then they say that that person is supposed to be a POC, and I'm like, no. So yeah, it's good that the developers of the game understood the backlash, and they ended up fixing the icon, which it's not the best, but you know what? It's still better than nothing. Talking about more game drama, this episode has a whole lot of drama. The Sims ended up releasing the trailer for their new pack. I guess it's an expansion pack, and it's titled The Sims 4 Star Wars Journey to Batuu, and the core Sim fanbase aren't happy. Because let's be real, I think it's been like 6 years since the first Sims 4 was released. And since then, the core base has been asking for babies, they have been asking for cars, they have been asking for hotels and farms, and things that you would expect to be part of a life simulation game in order to enhance the gameplay. What they don't want are basically husks of different areas where you go in and you can't necessarily do anything, and apparently that's what The Sims 4 Star Wars Journey to Batuu actually is. It's just an empty husk which looks pretty, but it doesn't provide anything gameplay-wise, and a whole lot of EA game changers online have been talking about their opinions and how, they're basically dragging Journey to Batuu, which, as far as my opinion goes, I understand where they're coming from. And EA ended up listening to all of the backlash, and they ended up releasing a statement. And I read that statement, and as far as my opinion goes, that statement was very condescending. And also the wording didn't make sense to me, especially that structural thing that they're talking about, that there are structural obstacles when it comes to providing the things that the core fandom wants. And I'm like, how can there be structural obstacles when it comes to adding cars and hotels and babies, unless The Sims 4 never wanted to give all of those things to the player base? Like, does that mean that The Sims 4, the people behind Sims 4, never really wanted to give a whole lot of gameplay, especially compared to the levels of gameplay that was offered because of Sims 2 and Sims 3. Like, was Sims 4 just a hack job? Was it just a cash grab? And yeah, it's just bad. And apparently the Sims team is working on another expansion, so hopefully that expansion might end up offering them something good. And but then again, in the statement they did say that don't expect too much from the upcoming expansion pack either. So I'm like, ooh, like, yeah, it's amazing drama. If you are a part of the Sims community or if you follow it, it's such an amazing drama that you're just basically seeing this beloved franchise being driven into the ground because apparently the developers don't necessarily understand what the fandom wants. They are releasing a whole lot of expansion packs that bring nothing to the table, and it's the entire, like, in my opinion, the Journey to Batuu expansion pack is very niche, and I don't think the core fandom is even going to play it, but let's see what happens. It's basically a recreation of Star Wars Galaxy Edge attraction, and it's basically an ad for the attraction. And I'm like, the people who are core players of The Sims don't want this, but yeah, it's a mess. Now, the last thing that I'm going to talk about, it's another messy drama, and it involves out actor Daniel Newman. He's bisexual, but don't quote me on it. But yeah, he's bisexual. So if you guys have been following Daniel Newman, he had a small role in the Walking Dead series. He was basically he was one of King Ezekiel's guards, and I liked him. I was actually disappointed when they ended up killing his character in The Walking Dead, but it is what it is. So Daniel Newman, if you follow him on his social media, Twitter and Instagram, he's very, very proactive when it comes to supporting BLM and supporting trans lives and all of that stuff. And he ended up tweeting about how if you have depth, your clique or tribe will almost never look like you. Don't sweat it when your peers reject you. Close your eyes and look for people with the same goals and interests, not the same body type, skin color, body type, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, hashtag diversity, which, I mean, I understand where he's coming from. But then again, after he tweeted this, approximately 4 or 5 hours later, he ended up tweeting this picture. Oh, and it's like summer fun, private island, all tested negative multiple times, wear a mask, and like, if you see this picture and you compare it to his previous tweet, I'm like, Daniel, what are you doing? Daniel, why would you do this? Of course, it ended up facing a whole lot of backlash on Twitter, and people were also making fun of it about how there's only one woman in there, and everyone basically looks white or is white passing, and everyone has basically the same type of a body, and yeah, it's a mess. And it basically, people are saying that Newman is playing a role, and he is perpetuating this problem in the queer community, where if you don't have six-pack abs, you aren't worthy of attention, or if you don't look like a model, then no one is going to value you, and all of that stuff. And I think Newman ended up taking this picture down. And there's also this thing about how the area that they were in isn't actually a private island, and that he apparently lied about it, and that how all of these people shouldn't even be partying, especially because of the pandemic that the entire world is facing. But anyway, coming back to Daniel, as I said, I think he took down this picture from Twitter, and then he took to Instagram. And on Instagram, he has this video where he's talking about loving your body. And in the video, he actually shows this little flab on his stomach and his chest, and how even his body isn't even perfect, or doesn't follow the conventional, what it means to be conventionally handsome, even though he might look better in certain images. And he does address the picture. He does address that he realizes how that it doesn't look good, that first he ended up tweeting that about how your tribe and clique will almost never look like you. And then a few hours later, he ended up tweeting that picture with a whole lot of fit white guys in there. Like, at least he acknowledges it. And he also talked about how basically that friend group isn't actually his friend group. he was invited to a birthday party, and a whole lot of friends are basically friends of another friend, and not necessarily his friends. And that his half of his family is black. There are also Latino people in there, and yeah, I can understand where Daniel is coming from. And I do appreciate that he did acknowledge this situation, and he was basically, I mean, Daniel did say that he was kind of making fun when of the entire group when he posted the picture, because I mean, no one is that dense that you would first tweet about how your friend group needs to be different, and then a few hours later you end up posting a pic where everyone is basically a fit white guy. Like, you can't be that dense that you don't even notice that it's an issue, that it might end up being an issue online. So I think that Daniel was trying to make a joke. He was trying to make fun of the group he was basically in. But that joke, I guess, didn't sit well with certain people online, which, again, it happens. It's Twitter. Things happen. And yeah, there are people who are saying that Daniel is a fake activist, and again, I understand where they're coming from, but as far as my opinion goes, I'm like, even if activism is, let's say, fake, allegedly the entire activism that Daniel Newman does is fake. However, he is still giving his time. He is still signing petitions. He is still bringing attention to certain issues, certain important issues. So even if it's kind of fake, the end result is still the same. The end result is still bringing attention to these serious issues. It's the same thing that certain people accuse certain celebrities of, that, oh, they ended up going out to hand food to poor people, but why were they recording? Why were they taking pictures? And I'm like, the end result is that that poor person did still have a meal for that day. So even if you don't think that that activism is true, look at the result. The result is that that poor person still got to eat that day. Yeah, even if you think that Daniel Newman isn't a true activist, allegedly, but I mean, he's still bringing attention to certain things, and yeah, he's still playing a role. Seeing him get dragged on Twitter, it was kind of funny. People did end up doing a parody video, and yeah, but I mean, you know what? It's Twitter. Things happen. Again, Daniel acknowledges what he did. Anyway, that's that for today's Geekiary News Briefs. If there's any news piece that you want me to talk about, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. And yeah, until next time, stay happy, stay safe, stay blessed, and I'll see you guys later.